The next speaker that I would like to introduce to you is Cameron Saul. I've known Cameron for a few years now, and he's managed to mix music, fashion, care, with people at the center of what he's doing to create a new kind of fashion. So he's going to share with you now a little bit about what that looks like, how you can do that, and what it takes. So please join me in welcoming Cameron Saul.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilys. And thank you, Stacey. And thank you, Selfridges, for having us for what I think is a really interesting and important event. I think just picking up on Stacey's last comment about, ultimately it's all about consumers, and it is all about consumers, but consumers also have to be given the opportunity. And I think that's why, Selfridges making this store-wide statement is so important, because the ripple effects that go out across the fashion industry are undeniable, from a buying public perspective, from all of the stores out there. So big up Selfridges. So I'm Cameron Saul. I'm going to talk you through the Bottletop story, which goes from Uganda to the northeast of Brazil in Bahia via probably London, Paris, New York, and a few other less famous places. But my own personal journey with fashion began at an early age. My father founded Mulberry. So for me, school holidays were spent very much in the stockroom, on the shop floor, in the showroom, and back in the stockroom. And so when I left school, I worked for Mulberry in Paris and for another menswear designer in Milan. But at that point, I also wanted to have a different kind of experience. And so I'd heard about this project that put people in far-flung corners of the world. And I went to Uganda and lived in the mountains for 9 months teaching health education. And I still remember vividly that first day when I arrived in this classroom without any doors or windows to teach a class of probably 125 kids about, health education, safe sex, sanitation, hygiene, and so on. And they could barely speak English, let alone, understand those kinds of issues and complexities. And I remember feeling totally overwhelmed, totally out of my depth, and thinking, Christ, what can we possibly do here to really make a difference? And I think probably at that point we nearly gave up before we'd even begun. Fortunately, we didn't, and within just 6 months, those same youngsters took over from us and staged what I genuinely believe was one of the most important days in the history of that village, a health day, where they took over and taught their friends and family and wider community about all of those issues that we'd been teaching them about, all of these important, particularly in that area, health issues. But they did it through their local tribal tongue and through music and song and dance, and in ways that they could really understand and assimilate. And it was, a light bulb moment for me. It made me realize that actually young people are the same all over the world, and if you give them the right opportunity, the right support, and the right education, that they can learn to make healthy choices, protect themselves, and protect one another. So I'd been inspired, if you like, and the following week, something popped up in my world, which was a bag made from bottle tops. And I immediately fell in love with it, thought that it was super cool, almost a piece of wearable pop art, and knew that I could sell tons of them back in the UK. So sure enough, when I was then back at university in London, I stepped in and was wholesaling the women's accessory collection for my father and Mulberry. But the thing that I was really excited about was getting some samples of these bags over. And I remember unpacking these crazy wire bottle top bags from these boxes in the Mulberry showroom, actually almost stone's throw from here on G's Court. And people kind of crowding around to see what it was I was pulling out. And out came these bags, and everyone just freaked out. They'd never seen anything like it. And so we sat down, and my father and I redesigned the bag, adding a Mulberry leather lining, offcuts from the factory floor so that it was 100% sustainable and upcycled. And we devised the Mulberry Bottletop campaign, which was an all-encompassing brand-wide campaign which we rolled out through all of their stores. It became the best-selling bag of the season globally for them, generated £150,000 for the grassroots charity that I've been working for in Uganda. We set up teams of artisans in Nairobi and in Cape Town, training them how to, make these bags, or at least the shell of the bags, and then the linings were added in Europe. And it was a complete runaway success. And I think at that point, we could have thought, oh, well, that was great, and, it's done some good, and probably, that would have been the more sensible option. But actually, we very firmly believed that we'd unearthed something far more important than that, and actually a brand that stood for far more. We really felt that that was the blueprint for a brand that was about not only beautiful, high-quality, sustainable design, but also about cross-cultural collaboration, creating new original things, working from interesting production techniques from different parts of the world, and also about empowerment, about supporting craftsmen in different parts of the world, using that as a vehicle to alleviate poverty, and then using the proceeds to support health education projects. The campaign generated it was Mulberry's largest marketing campaign to date up until that point, and we really galvanized a lot of support across the spectrum, from the fashion industry right through to the political arena. And so after that, we're talking back in sort of 2002, 2003, and so we registered Bottletop as a foundation separately from Mulberry. We were before any wider movements in sustainability or ethical fashion, but knew that we were a brand, but very much a brand on a mission. So actually our next project was to take this concept of cross-cultural collaboration and try and generate a revenue stream into the foundation through music. So we originally remixed African music with leading electronic artists and DJs. That was a magical moment for me because I met my business partner with Bottletop, Oliver Wayman, who was a scout for Island Records. And he and I were entranced by the music of Brazil, and that was the first time that we then turned our attention to South America and Brazil and what was happening there. And beautifully, coincidentally, at that time, his mother came across a handbag made from recycled ring pulls. And we thought, God, that sounds bizarre, kind of similar to perhaps what we'd done in Africa. So we went to Brazil while we were working on the record for ourselves and discovered these ring pull bags, which were amazing. And it was really the material that we fell in love with more than anything else, this super lightweight, almost futuristic chainmail made entirely from trash. And we could see, again, very easily that this was something that we could elevate to a luxury level. So we'd met an amazing young guy running a health center in that community, the Itapuã that I just had up on the screen. And we were like, how can we find and source and develop some of these bags? And he said, well, listen, all of the ladies come to the health center where I work. 95% of them are unemployed. They would love the opportunity to learn a skill, and if that leads to an income, then amazing. So sure enough, we provided lessons, and I think probably there's something in the water in Bahia because the level of skill when it comes to handcraft and detail is sensational. So very quickly, these ladies learned these kind of bag silhouettes that we were throwing at them, and very quickly they were making gorgeous, simple but gorgeous bags. And we focused on that for probably 3 to 5 years, really mastering that and executing these crochet techniques. And it was really at that point we knew, we were starting to really provide serious support for local ladies in the community. But we knew that we wanted to open up the color palette and again, start to raise the bar in terms of the elevation of this material and taking it to more of a premium luxury place. So opening up the color palette when you're talking about metal is kind of a problem because paint and metal hate one another. Fundamentally, paint will always come off of a metal. So it took us best part of 3 years to develop an amazing custom enameling process that's a kind of complicated combination of primers and varnish and paints, which create an effect which I think you'll agree is quite spectacular, and enabled us to then really, again, start being more creative in terms of the seasonal offerings that we were able to provide. The material, of course, that we really wanted to get involved with, and is a material that's close to my heart, and obviously the most important in the luxury goods space is leather. And so we approached a veteran bag designer, you could say, a chap in Paris called Vincent Dussartel, who was head of accessory design for Louis Vuitton, creative director of Loewe, and we went and met with him and challenged him to create a collection of leather bags using this kind of signature material of ours, these recycled metal ring pulls. And he definitely thought we were completely bonkers, probably still does. And about 9 months later, the first fruits of that project you can see here. So he kept it decorative but functional, and really gave life to the ring pulls in a really interesting new way, which we loved. So for the next probably 3 years, we were taking members of his team from Paris and working alongside the guys in our community, exchanging ideas, and I think by this point, our team had actually become so adept in working, with kind of braiding and crochet work that it really was a beautiful continuation of this whole value set for us, which is about cross-cultural collaboration to create things that are new, original, and even more beautiful. What we then wanted to do was effectively expose this work to the world. So we'd been working on a project with Jessica Alba, and she introduced us to Narciso Rodriguez. We went and found him in New York, and as one of those wonderful luck would have it moments, we're sat down with him in his New York showroom, and trying to impress him. And he was like, "So where did this kind of leather braiding idea and thing come from?" And we're like, "Well, Brazil, and we've been working with this designer. You probably won't have heard of him in Paris, called Vincent." He's like, "Vincent?" And he'd not seen this guy for 15 years, but actually he'd been his mentor at the start of his career for, probably 5 or 10 years. And so, it was another reason for him to get behind our work and take the work that we'd, perfected with Vincent to a whole nother level in terms of really pushing the boundaries, using the leather braiding across the whole sort of structured body of the bag, as you can see from the example here. So, again, this was something that, our girls mastered in Brazil. This wasn't made at one of the top design studios in Italy or Spain. This was made in Brazil, in Bahia, by our girls. And I think, again, just setting out to prove that if that's possible there, then it's possible anywhere in the world to support communities. So this is where we launched the collection in London and New York over the last sort of 18 months. Whilst we were working on that project with Narciso, we read an article by none other than Lucy Siegel, who's here with us tonight, about the devastating impact of ranching on the Amazon rainforest. And of course, always setting out to use the most sustainable materials in our designs. We took serious notice of this. We quickly learned that Brazil has the largest commercial cattle herd in the world of 210 million cattle. And actually in the Amazon region, over the last 2 decades, that has increased from 20 to 60 million head of cattle. And over that same period of time, we've seen an eradication of 116,000 square miles of rainforest, an area the same size as New Mexico. So I think many of us, and Oliver and myself included, just hadn't realized the devastating effect that leather and ranching was having on the rainforest. So we then set out, and over the last couple of years have been working with the National Wildlife Federation and the JBS, which is the largest meat packer in Brazil, to develop certified zero deforestation leather, which effectively is a system of traceability going right back to the fields where the cows are roaming, and proving that they've not been involved in ranching that's causing the deforestation. It's been a pioneering project in the gateway to the Amazon, which has had incredible results and is really supporting ranchers in best practice land management so that they can understand how they can get it right, how they can be part of the solution. And it's quite exciting, actually, because the quality of the leather is also sublime, which it has to be if it's going to sell and if it's going to work on a wider level. So that's something that we're very excited to be really championing as part of our new collection that we're launching here with Selfridges. And it then stacks up behind in terms of our own brand's value system, in terms of the upcycled materials that we use in the bags, the recycled plastic linings that we use in the bags, which feels like the most divine kind of silk. And I think on a day-to-day level, we're still inspired fundamentally by the artisans that we support and the young people that we continue to support through our network of education projects through our foundation. I'm just going to quickly show you a little video clip before I hand over to the next.
Some people say nothing will come of nothing. But they are wrong. They can't see. You need nothing to love.
Thank you very much.